So, Lone Rider here, and I want to talk about the power of why. Right? A lot of people seem to be under the impression that the way to stop bad government policy, bans, prohibitions, things like that, that would infringe on people, take away their stuff, make it difficult for them to pursue their interests. That the way to stop these is simply to refuse, to say, no, that's not a good policy, etc. And there is obviously some merit to that, just straight out opposing a policy that you believe is going to be unjust or counterproductive or unconstitutional or etc. Is certainly a way to go. But there's also something to be said for the power of putting it on them to try and explain. Right? A lot of people, I think, when they proceed with a proposal to outlaw or restrict something, they're going with the assumption that their view, no matter how much of an outlier their view might be to regular people, they're going with the assumption that their view is like the default, and that there's absolutely no reason why anybody shouldn't want to outlaw X, whatever X is, whether it's people who don't want to allow mountain biking, as we saw here in New Jersey, with Union County's policy of excluding mountain biking from local parks, or whether it's something a little bit more, of a widespread issue, like let's say gun control or whatever. But when somebody says, well, we should outlaw this, we should restrict this, oppose it by all means, but more importantly, ask them why. Right? Why should we restrict this? And you'll find very quickly that they have a lot of rationalizations, but they don't really have a lot of reasons. Not good ones, anyway. Not good ones good enough to outweigh the negative impact of their policy and how it's going to infringe on, otherwise decent people who aren't hurting anybody. And in this case, simply asking them, like, when somebody says, for example, these particular magazines should be banned. I don't mean magazines like books or publication. I mean like firearm magazines that hold bullets. So somebody will say these are high capacity magazines. Now usually they're not. Usually they're simply standard capacity for that type of firearm. But it just indicates that these people don't understand firearms. So why are they making the rules? I don't know. It seems a precondition for making rules in this country is that you know very little about the subject you wish to regulate. I think that's kind of like the default now. But regardless, when somebody comes to you and says these magazines should be banned, we should outlaw them. Why? don't don't start with, well, you shouldn't ban them, blah blah blah. No. Simply, well, why? Right? Treat their proposal as what it is. Absurd, completely outside the realm of reason. And well, why would you want to ban something that's normal? Explain this to me, please. And you'll find usually that they can't, right? Same thing with mountain biking. People expected the mountain bikers to be, and I think to a large part, once the process got going here, like in Union County, when we were trying to get trail access, a lot of them did ultimately seek to put the onus on the mountain bikers. Prove why you should be allowed to ride in the park. Prove why you should be given trail access. Well, the reason they were taking that track is because the government had never, in over the 25 years that it had said mountain biking was forbidden, it had never even attempted to adequately address the question of why should mountain biking not be allowed, right? So instead they said, well, let's just start with the assumption that it's bad and then ask you to prove that you should be allowed to do it, rather than ask the government to demonstrate some reason to justify forbidding you from doing it. But see, the normal default position is that you're allowed to do it, right? Whatever the activity is. The default in a free country is that you're allowed to do X. It's not like, like an internet, whitelist where you have only certain allowed things. And it's like, okay, you can go to this website, you can go to this website, you can go to this website because they're on the list. Anything that's not on the list, you can't do. No, that's not how a free society works, right? A free society works. The default is you can do it. The exception is you can't. So if somebody's going to come to you and say you shouldn't be allowed to do X, whatever X is. Again, whether it's ride your mountain bike, whether it's make a statement that somebody wants, doesn't like and wants to censor, whether it's engage in the shooting sports and firearms or whatever. If somebody's going to tell you can't do that, or that it should be restricted in some way, then they should have to make a damn good case. And the starting, again, since the default in the free society is you can do it, and it's the exception that's you can't. The onus should always be on whomever is asking you to give something up, to relinquish your freedom, your ability to live your life, your property, your rights, etc. If somebody's going to tell you that these should be infringed upon, then they should have to put forth a very damn compelling reason. Because even if their reason is the best in the world and the most, one that most people can relate to, it's still going to have a huge negative downside, right? Even if you could say, well, we're going to accomplish something really worthwhile by doing this. Yeah, but in the process, you're also going to hurt a lot of innocent people. So whatever that thing is, it can't just be run-of-the-mill worthwhile. Your goal has to be super convincing. Because no matter how good your goal is, there's still a downside, right? People are still going to be infringed on. People's lives are going to be affected. People are not going to be able to pursue their interests. In some cases, their constitutional rights or their property might be sacrificed. So if you want to, and that's even if your goals are good. Of course, if your goals are bad or just, lackluster, then you've sacrificed everybody's, rights and freedom and ability to live their own lives free of interference for nothing. That's really sad. But even if their goals are good and worthwhile and, worthy of being considered, you still have to address the fact that, yes, whatever good it's going to accomplish in line with those goals, it's still going to hurt all these innocent people. So that good has to be, that goal of yours has to be a pretty impressive good in order to even consider the trade-off, right? And that's the thing. I mean, the default is you don't throw the rights of person A under the bus on the hope that you can produce some positive benefit for person B or person C. Person A's rights are his by right. Right? Obviously, the government can suspend or cease the legal recognition of them, but they're his rights. Right? They don't begin with the government. They don't end with society or with people who choose to speak for society. They're things that he requires to be respected in order to live as a free human being. So if you're going to even consider throwing that person's rights or interests under the bus, I mean, right at the get-go, bang out of the gate, you better have a damn good convincing argument. And the irony is that not only are the arguments usually put forth for various, again, prohibitions or bans or whatever, not only are they not damn good convincing, they're usually so lackluster that they sound flat out incoherent or don't make any sense, right? You'll have people, like with mountain biking, for example, people are saying, well, you're going to be going 40 miles an hour on these dirt trails, and it's going to endanger everybody. Now, some people ride faster than others in various conditions, but I've never known a mountain biker who, out for an afternoon ride on a recreational public trail, multi-use public trail, got up to 40 miles an hour or anywhere nearabouts. Maybe on like a downhill race course, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about a recreational, dual-use, or multi-use rather, single and double track in a public park. Nobody rides that fast off-road under these conditions. I've been a cyclist for over 20 years, and I've never done that. And neither has anybody else I've ever known or corresponded with or talked to or, whatever. It just doesn't happen. Some people go faster than others, but it's a rare day that you get anywhere near that fast. And it was just, if anything, it just illustrated that this person didn't know anything about mountain biking. Now, somebody pointed out, well, maybe they saw like somebody posting their Strava score online for a ride through the road that goes through the Watchung Reservation. And of course, that's a paved road that goes through some very hilly terrain with ups and downs. Yeah, if you're going down a really steep hill on a paved road, you could easily get up to 40 on, like, let's say, a road bike. But we're not talking about road biking on paved roads. We're talking about mountain biking, recreational mountain biking on, again, a mixed use trail in a public park. So if somebody saw something, took it out of context, and is misrepresenting what that means, either innocently due to ignorance or, maliciously because they're just trying to make their case however they can, and they're that desperate because they don't have any facts. How does that reflect poorly on the mountain bikers? That somebody is either ignorantly misrepresenting something about them or flat out lying to people, right? It doesn't. All it proves is that the people who were opposing the idea of mountain biking either don't know a dang thing about it or know about it but don't care if they misrepresent it. Either of those things should more or less be a huge hurdle to credibility. If you're going to go to, let's say, a public freeholder meeting or something and lie to everybody present or misrepresent to everybody present, yes, a person who lies about one thing could be telling the truth in another instance, but it does create a huge credibility gap, right? Because the general thing is going forward, well, if they lied once, that publicly and that openly, are they going to be lying again? And then when you have something like misrepresenting the speed, let's say out of ignorance, because they just don't know. Well, okay, so they're not lying to you. They just have no idea what they're talking about. Nevertheless, should their statements then be given equal weight to people who do know what they're talking about, right? And we see this, another analogy with gun control. People who think a normal capacity magazine is a high capacity magazine. Okay, so you just have no idea what you're talking about, right? It's like those people who think that a military style assault rifle is the same thing as a civilian semi-automatic sporting rifle. It's like, no, it's not. It's not select fire. It's not. It's not a. If it was a military style rifle, it would already be very heavily restricted, and we wouldn't be having this discussion. You dumb so and so, So you're left with two things: either these people, they're just going on emotion and they're worked up about something and they just have no idea what they're talking about, or they're lying to everybody and misrepresenting it. Now, since a lot of these lies on bigger issues, such as like gun control, for example, are repeated by national media and big television channels and like CNN and like that, it's like, okay, you're telling me that a huge newspaper conglomerate or a huge cable news network does not have a research staff, right? You can find out the difference between select fire and semi-automatic only and the different legal statuses of both, and what constitutes a modern military style assault rifle versus a civilian legal semi-auto rifle. Just like you can find about how fast mountain bikers normally go under what condition. You can find all of this up by just Googling it. It takes like 5 minutes, not even. So it boggles my mind that the average person would get any of this wrong, unless they had a reason to basically misrepresent it. That a major news corporation would get it wrong says to me that, well, I mean, they've got research staffs and stuff that are paid to look up things like this. You're telling me that, if Joe Blow, public citizen, could just Google it on his iPhone or on his desktop, that you can't have your research staff do the same thing or actually do even more in-depth research, maybe? But no, they don't. So at some point, it becomes, when it's so easy to find the truth, if you're misrepresenting something that's not the truth, it does raise the question of, how much of this is an innocent mistake and how much of this is just you flat out lying to people, right? And when you're lying to people about something that's so easy to confirm otherwise, to find out otherwise, you really can't give the benefit of the doubt. After a certain point, it's like, yeah, they might be misinformed, but to be that misinformed, you'd have to have grown up in a box or something, right, with no access to information or books or libraries or computers or whatever. It just doesn't fly with, especially when you're talking about a major media organization that is paid to research facts, and it seems awfully strange that they would get the facts so wrong. by accident. Yeah, so maybe it's not by accident. But that said, when they come to you and they say we should outlaw this, this, and this, whatever this, and this is, whether it's restricting mountain biking, whether it's outlawing things for some supposedly environmental purpose, they pollute too much, whether it's gun control, etc. The most powerful thing you can do is just ask them, you say this particular thing should be banned. Why? you know? And again, you're not going to get an answer that justifies violating anybody's rights, taking away their property, infringing on their lives. If any answer could, it would have to be a really, really good one. You're not going to get a good one. You're going to get something that's kind of lame and lackluster and hodgepodge together, and may not even seem coherent or intelligible. Or if it is coherent, the only thing it'll allow you to get out of it is that person doesn't appear to know what they're talking about, or is using the wrong word for something, or is misrepresenting facts or whatever. And there is a certain power in putting something on the spot, putting an idea in the hot seat, if you will, and asking that it be explained, that it be justified. I think, like I said, the default for many of these people is they seem to be operating under the assumption that their view is, the normal one, and that everybody, there's absolutely no reason why everybody wouldn't see a particular thing, whether it's mountain biking or gas-powered cars or firearms or whatever, and say, well, of course we should ban that. Why wouldn't we? Whereas I think for most people, if the government's gonna come to them and tell them that they can't do a particular thing or own a particular thing or participate in a particular activity, they're gonna ask that they be given a really good justification for that, at a bare minimum. And since these people can't provide that, what happens? Well, they come to you and say, we should outlaw X, whatever X is. The first thing you can do to try and stop them is just ask them why. And the funny thing is, they're not prepared for this. They're not prepared for any serious examination of the issue, generally speaking. Again, whether you're talking something as disparate as mountain biking or gun control, the general default with people who want prohibitive rules or legislation or whatever, government policies, is that because they have no regard for the activity or item or whatever it is they wish to restrict, they simply think of it as something bad and that's it. They usually don't bother to learn a lot about it. And so they're completely unprepared, generally speaking, when you ask them to explain themselves. Somebody comes up to you, well, we should outlaw that that rifle that you just spent 3 weeks paying on and use it to go target shooting. Yeah, we should outlaw that. We should take it away from you. You shouldn't be allowed to have that. Most people are going to be like, why? Why shouldn't I be allowed to have it? And they can't really give you any good answer, right? Somebody's going to, I know you've been riding in parks all over the state and all over the country on your mountain bikes, and it's generally accepted. And hell, even the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection has links to mountain biking websites, and it recognizes the activity as legitimate. But in our county, mountain bikers are considered evil, and we're not going to allow you to do it. Okay, why? And from that point on, they're going to trip themselves up, right? They'll make one statement and contradict it with something else. They'll try to make an argument, but it'll just be, all it'll be doing is proving that they really don't know anything about the subject they're trying to regulate. And it's just, it's kind of sad, really, right? A lot of this could be prevented. A lot of grief for decent citizens who just want to be left alone and not infringed on could be prevented if these people just went home and did their homework. And them wasting their own time trying to pass stupid and intrusive and cockamamie laws could also be prevented if they just went home and did some homework, right? I understand people get upset about something, whether it's they don't want to share the park with mountain bikers, or whether it's they hear about, or maybe even, Campanolo forbid, we're a victim of some horrible violent crime, let's say using a firearm. But being upset or worked up about something doesn't mean you understand all the policy ramifications, and doesn't mean that you're going to be able to justify when somebody asks you, why should I give up this, this, and this, that you're going to be able to give them a good enough reason to convince them. In fact, you're usually not even going to be able to give them a good enough reason to even get them to consider listening to you. Why is that? Because you're not thinking in terms of reasons. You're just thinking in terms of, you're worked up and you want an outlet for your frustration. And the irony with this is that if somebody is really bothered by something, whether it's mountain bikers in a park or whether it's the incidence of a particularly violent crime involving a firearm, that emotional distress and the fact that they're upset and they're really bothered by this could spur them to actually learn about the subject and make a valuable contribution to our society in terms of maybe helping to address the issue. But instead, they usually just, run around like chickens with their heads cut off and try to, infringe on other people who had nothing to do with it or who aren't doing anything wrong. And it's like, well, wait, because you have some, irrational emotional bias. You want me to stop doing what I'm doing? You want me to give them my property or my rights or my hobby or my interests or my constitutional protections? Like, hell's wrong with you? Explain that. And the problem is they can't, because they really haven't really bothered to learn about the issue. They hang out with other people who think similarly, and they all kind of are starting with the starting point that prohibition is the default position in society. So it almost never occurs to them that they'd be put on the spot and asked to justify it, starting from the point of it should be allowed and it should be recognized as normal. Why should we listen to you when you want to redefine it as forbidden? And that throws them from a loop, because they're starting with the position that it should be forbidden. They've almost never considered any other alternative. It's essentially a form of ideological bigotry, I guess, or lack of vision. It's like they're only looking at one tiny thing, and they have no idea that there's a whole world out there populated by people with different views, many of whom don't take kindly to being told that they're going to get their stuff taken away or that they're not going to be allowed to pursue their hobbies and interests. So, if a lot of people, when you have politicians who oppose a government policy, a lot of times they get, dismissingly, labeled as, oh, they're the party of no, for example, was a big one a few years ago. And no is powerful, saying no to people who want to, infringe on your rights or whatever. But a more powerful thing is to put them on the spot and ask them to explain themselves. And then sit back and watch them as they basically prove to anybody who's listening that they're not the people we should go to for policy suggestions. Because they either literally don't understand the topic, they don't understand how most people see the issue, or they are actively trying to mislead. Right? And the fact that somebody would even go public with a suggestion to limit the rights or property or whatever of their fellow citizens without first having come up with a good reason to try and justify it, they haven't thought this through. If they haven't thought it through, we should not listen to them. So, why and asking why and putting somebody on the spot in that sense can be very powerful. And I would recommend we do it, because you're essentially letting their own ignorance prove your case for you. Right? So, lone rider out, and I know there's a lot of times when, as a decent citizen who just wants to be left alone, you're looking around at things in the world and you're like, my God, it's like this craziness coming from left, right, sideways, and all these people have all these proposals that want to try and infringe on me and take away my stuff and turn my life upside down. And I don't want to be involved in any of that. I just want to be left the hell alone to live my life and not hurt anybody like I'm doing. And sometimes it's like, well, however will we stop this craziness? And, not for nothing, but you say to the crazy people, well, explain yourself. That kind of stops it right there, right? Because now instead of having momentum going forward, just, repeating their slogans and their bromides, they actually have to sit and examine the issue, something they've never done before. And again, I think that's telling, the fact that somebody would go public, go on CNN, right, the congressman, stage a protest, whatever, without actually having thought it through. Without actually having come up with a reason that could justify that kind of infringement on their fellow citizens. I think that's saying an awful lot. So, Lone Rider out. Rock on. Stay safe. Take care.